Our next segment is going to be about refereeing decisions, because we all love a good refereeing talking point. This week, I've decided to focus heavily on Mr. Michael Dean, um, his decision making, and subsequent abuse. So, two separate matters to discuss about that, and on which such we will dissect Shustek's sending off and a foul by Lacazette, because there was a definite foul by Lacazette, and how that became a bit of a talking point. So we'll talk about Mike Dean generally first of all. So Mike has been refereeing for the last 2 weeks, and within those 2 weeks he has sent off 3 individuals with the aid of video assistant referee Lee Mason. Now, we could get into a VAR discussion, but it would take a full podcast, so we won't do that. But I want to get your guys' opinion first of all on the Shustek chat. I'm saying that completely wrong, but it sounds nice. So Vladimir Shustek, is that his first name? Probably.
No. Thomas.
Thomas Shustek.
Actual racism. I'll just pick the first Slavic name that comes
you're
into my
butchering
head.
his surname, so you might as well butcher the first name.
Why not? I'm getting him confused with Kufal. So Shustek's red card. I watched it live. I don't know about if any of you guys did. And when you look at it live, and you know the situation of the game, it's just not a red card. It's quite clearly an accident. And the way that Mitrovic just went down holding his face, I'm not going to deny it hurt him, because an elbow to the face is never going to be pleasant. But when you watched it live, it was a clear, to me, he's raising his elbow to get out of the road and he's clipped him in the face. Mike Dean is 10 feet away, perfect view of it, doesn't give any challenge. In fact, he blows the whistle. He does blow the whistle because he's seen the instant, he runs over because he just wants to have a talk to them. And at that point, Lee Mason gets involved in the VAR. And then Mike Dean makes a decision to look at the VAR monitor and subsequently send the guy off, Shustek. First talking point, Mitrovic, you see him yelling to Mike Dean that it's not a red card, it's not violent conduct. So when a player's telling you it's not violent conduct, it gives you a wee hint that it's probably not violent conduct. I was going to bring up was Lee Mason and VAR. The problem I had with that certain scenario is when Lee Mason and the VAR team slow that incident down, it looks worse than it is. And there was only one incident when Mike was viewing it that it was in full speed. And for any situation involving violent conduct, when you slow something down, it looks worse than it actually is. And I think it's when he's done that, when he's slowed it down, that's then caused him to make the decision to send him off. So, with all those points on board, Alistair, if you would like to kick off your viewpoint on said red card.
Okay, so firstly, it's nice to see that you're going on the referees union and you've shaved your head like Mike Dean.
I'm doing it in honour for Mike.
And secondly, last week you said that there's not a bad referee in England, and I can point to it to you because that sending off is a joke.
Yeah,
like the game is dead if that's a red card. Anybody on the street, if you got somebody who'd never seen a football game in their life and said, "Is that accidental?" they'd have gone, "Yeah, it looks like he's just about to lift his arm over and he's clipped him." So the fact that not one but 2 qualified referees can come to the conclusion that that is a red card is it raises serious questions about their decision making and their calibre. Like, it just has to. And you know, in terms of Mitrovic, he's a snake for dropping down and rolling. Like, it doesn't matter if he gets up and says, "Oh no, I'm sorry, it wasn't a red card. Oh, you know, he just clipped me. It was an accident." It's done, mate. You've rolled about like a fanny already.
Yeah.
So, nah. The decision was a joke. Mitrovic's action was a joke. they rightfully overturned it, but yeah, serious questions about the standard of refereeing.
Yeah, no, and I think I jinxed myself, and I do remember saying that. I genuinely didn't believe there was a bad referee in England. I don't think there is a bad referee anywhere, really. I feel you get bad referee in teams.
There are bad referees, like.
Aye, but separate debate. Anyway, I do feel, yeah, I absolutely understand what you're saying. It does take into question a lot of decision making. And Mike Dean has been around the block, and a big part of refereeing that I was certainly taught is, yeah, you've got the laws of the game, but use your common sense, use your head. If you can stop a situation from spiraling out of control, or if you can stop a situation full stop, then do that. And I've seen a lot of comments about Mike has a personality about him, and because he has a personality, he sometimes takes that into the games, and sometimes he wants to make a game about him, and that's why people are saying he made, there was a part in his head made the decision to send him off because he wanted the headline. Do I believe that? I want to believe no, but I don't think any referee should have that. But when you look at the decision, it does raise the question. Ryan, Fleming, anything to add?
I mean, brace yourself, gents, because this is going to happen once in a blue moon. I will very partially defend the referee. I mean, I'm in full agreement with you guys that it's absolutely not a red card. It's just not a red card. Like, I suppose, I mean, for all his experience, Mike Dean, the one thing you can say is that, yet again, and I know this is a separate debate we're going to have another time, but I'm just going to touch on it, VAR for me has put him in a very difficult situation. As soon as they tell him to go, like, there might be something you want to have a look at, I mean, immediately in your head, you're going to be thinking, oh, well, I've messed up here somehow.
Yep.
And I feel like that's always going to be the ref mentality when they have to go across the screen. So that is the one, like, bit of comfort I suppose you can cling to. And I know another thing we're just going to get on, obviously, regardless of how atrocious a decision it was, and it was a bad one, like, no one deserves death for it.
Yeah, I think very good point about VAR, in the sense that as soon as VAR gets involved, the referee's mentality changes completely, because you know straight away that you've made a mistake, like you said, Ryan. But also when you watch the game, Mike Dean is going over to them to tell him to just, cut it out. He has no intentions of sending a player off or even giving a free kick, because there's already a free kick being taken. This is just an off the ball incident. So I think that tells you there he's not wanting to send them off. If you break it down, and I'm going strictly by the laws of the game here, right, and I'll put it on screen somewhere, the terminology for violent conduct. He's struck an opponent with his elbow. There isn't any intent, arguably, but when you slowed it down, he does look at him, he knows he's there, the elbow then comes up. Now, we all think it's not a red card, we all think he's just trying to clear him, but if you're breaking it down into the laws of the game, the elbow isn't being used as a tool there, the elbow is being used as a weapon, arguably, because he's hit him in the face with it. If he's using it as a tool, he's trying to push him back with the elbow, rather than going straight up to the face.
Does everybody walk around the football pitch like a penguin in case they're
no.
in the face?
Absolutely no, absolutely not. Look, again, in the laws of the game.
Anytime anybody raised their hands up for any natural motion, it's becoming a weapon. Like you can't officiate against that. Like
no, but if you're looking at it,
I saw something where they said he had a clenched fist.
Yeah, there wasn't any clenched fist. Yeah, that's what Lee Mason. That's what VAR had reported. Lee Mason had told Mike that you need to look at the clenched fist, because a clenched fist would show aggression, and therefore he's meant to do that. There wasn't any clenched fist when you look at it. There isn't. And arguably, if I'm pushing my elbow up, it feels odd just doing that. So you are going to have your fist clenched to come up the way. But yeah, not a red card. Final thing on that, Fleming?
No, well, not too much to add. You guys have covered it pretty well, but I think one thing to also bring into account is when something is slowed down by VAR and when the pundits do it after a game or at half time, you're always going to think, oh, that's worse than it is because it's getting slowed down. So you're seeing the impact in stages, whereas a guy's seen it like that in like half a second. So every challenge is going to look bad, but at the same time, no, it's not a red card in my eyes. Whether they think it is in the rules of the game, but no, I don't see why they had to get VAR involved. As you say, Mike Deans went over to say, look, cut it, take the free kick again. But,
End of. Aye. So, obviously, a follow up to that, it was reported by the BBC that Mike Dean and Sky Sport, Mike Dean was not wanting to referee last night's Leicester Brighton game because of death threats that he'd received. Now, I think everyone is in agreement, majority of people are in agreement that nobody should be getting death threats when they're literally just doing their job. You know, that's Mike Dean's career, and he's receiving death threats for that. So I think all four of us would condemn that. I think the majority of common people would condemn that. But when I did look, because I had a browse through Twitter, and there was people genuinely defending death threats to Mike Dean, and they were giving reasons for it. And again, it makes you question where football is these days. That there's people out there that genuinely think threatening the life of a man refereeing a game of football is acceptable.
The problem is that it's the footballing culture right up the pyramid from Sunday League to the Premier League to abuse referees. It's normalised from a young age, so people don't see the person. They don't see Mike Dean as a father of 2 kids or whatever. They just see him as an object to abuse. And it's like, you'll know yourself, like you'll be down there refereeing a kids game and you'll be the refs getting dogs abuse from the kids and the parents at the side, and that carries itself all the way through. And translates onto online social media.
I think football. Me and my dad talk about this a lot, and you as a rugby fan as well, Alistair, will agree. The respect between players to the referee in rugby is so far beyond what football is. Football, they're at the point of almost like pushing and shoving the referee. They're in their face, they're shouting, they're bawling. Rugby, they're a good 2 feet away and just allowing the referee to explain his decision and then going, okay, thank you, and then he'll go and speak to his team about it. How they can't get some sort of happy medium in football about it, I don't know.
It's an automatic red in rugby. If you backchat to the ref or disrespect the ref, it's a red card. In fact, it's not even that. If you did it and the ref didn't hear you, your coach would pull you off and give you a bollocking. So that's the culture that you need in football. Absolutely.
You are seeing a change. Certainly, I've not refereed a game in football in about 2 or 3 months now, but there was a bit of a culture shift, specifically in our leagues, and that's came from league secretaries, etc. That generally speaking, coaches will now just take their players off if there is abuse getting directed at the referees. It's a very a minority of teams doing it, but you can see a bit of a culture change in that, so it's good to see. But I've been there, I've been threatened, I've had abuse, not to the extent of Mike Dean, of course, but it's worrying when a referee says, no, I don't want to officiate this weekend because of it. And it's good to see Instagram and Facebook, and certainly Instagram has came out this week and said it's going to stop these trolls from doing that, so hopefully Facebook and Twitter follow suit. But yes, no need for it at all.
It's part of it as well as we were saying, Ryan alluded to it, but it's the the lack of transparency with VAR is that the referee is the only outlet for people's anger because there is no real-time explanation of things. So VAR is faceless and it leaves the referees exposed.
And I think that's one thing we've definitely discussed it. I've shown you a clip from a season or 2 ago of an Australian league game where every referee's mic'd up, the linesmen are mic'd up, the referee and the VAR, and you can hear the conversations they're having. it still eludes me how that's not a thing. You know, if fans and the audience behind the TV were able to listen in on the conversations that they're having and the decision making they're having, there wouldn't be as much abuse and stuff, because at least the fans are getting justification. And I'll apply that to I'll apply that to a Saturday game. If I'm doing a game on a Saturday and I give a free kick and I'm getting abuse from the sideline or questioning me from the sideline, I tell them why I've given it, they shut up. They stop straight away because you've explained it. You've given them a reason for the free kick. Same to the players. You tell them why you've given something, that's fine. They can't then argue it. Some will try to argue it, but you've at least given them a justification. So
you see it in rugby though. They also are all mic'd up.
Yeah.
Again, I go back to rugby with the referee, and they make it clear to every player what is going on. He'll say, "Look, give me a minute. I'm talking to the video referee to whether it's a try or not, or whatever." But they do explain it thoroughly, and they'll say to each captain, "This is what's happened. We've looked at it again, and this is the decision. That's it."
You're also not supposed to approach the referee unless invited.
No.
So
yeah.
if there's an issue, the referee will say, "Okay, I want to speak to blue 10 and red 15," and then he'll address them to come forward.
Yeah.
So you'll see an issue happen, and say it was a high tackle, you won't get players crowding around the ref in his face, brandishing a card or anything, because they trust the process, firstly. And secondly, they're respectful, so the referee will call someone forward and then speak to them. And mostly, in all circumstances, mostly it goes through the captains in general. Like if he has an issue with a team or anything, or if he wants to communicate to the team, he'll speak to the captains and get them to get the point across. And I know you see a bit of that in football, but not enough.
No.
And it's not the
it's
rule.
not often. And it's not often as well. I mean, the captain's the only ones that are meant to speak to the referee in a football game. Doesn't happen very often. You'll get some, Jordan Hendersons of the world, they'll come up and speak to a referee, but that doesn't really happen.
You were talking about, so we said the referees in rugby are mic'd up, but then this isn't done in football. Is that a PGMLO decision? Is that an FA decision? Where is that coming from? Why is it not happening?
I think, cracking question, I don't know. I would assume it's by various. I would assume there must be politics as well from the media companies, because you'd have to have an agreement with them to distribute that audio. But if I'm completely honest, I don't know why, and it frustrates me why, because why not? There would just not be any of these issues that's coming up. Same with referees having a press conference at the end. That would be amazing. If you could bring up Mike Dean and say, "Mike, talk to us about this," and he gives you the opinions of what he's done or what he's seen. There would just be no. There's always going to be arguments in football, don't get me wrong, but it would lessen the reason for an argument, because the referee spoke and he's told you why he's given a decision. So I reckon there's definitely politics involved somewhere, Ryan. I don't understand why not though, because I really think it's something that will happen eventually. I just wish it would happen sooner rather than later.
Yeah, because for me, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not going to solve all the problems, because no matter what you do, you're not going to please everyone.
No.
But at least if a referee did come out after a game, or you could hear him during the day, during the game, his thought process, his decision making, you'd be like, okay, fair enough. If he's seen it like that, then I suppose I can see why he's given a red there.
Yeah.
But there's just nothing, and you're just left empty and angry, and obviously that's what's fueling
all the death threats. Yeah.
You can't justify it in any way or condone it, but that is obviously what's fueling all this hate we're seeing online.
Yeah. And I mean, if Mike Dean had been mic'd up, and then if he had been sent to a press conference after the red card and explained it, because he explained it to Shusek when he's on the field, you could see him having a chat with him, I don't think the death threats would have come, or there would have been lesser ones.
I mean, I'm not saying Mike Dean should be demoted, but
no.
I think that the problem is that if you get, I don't punish is the right word, because
educated.
I think you can, referees can be accountable for their actions, but not in a manner in which undermines them.
Yeah.
So if you had a system in place where the problem is that what the way they would do it is they would do it on a case by case basis, but the case by case basis would be like everything. It'd be a scattergun approach. If you just had like a, I don't know, like a 3 strikes and you're like, you go to the championship for a week or 2 or something. I don't know. Like I'm not arguing for it, but maybe that would, maybe people would have more trust in referees if they trusted that there was. I said the referees aren't accountable. Maybe that would make them accountable. I don't know.
Yeah,
you have to be consistent in how you applied it.
Because then they would know that they're going down. Yeah. No, I know what you mean.
How do you, it could be a slippery slope, but at the same time, you can't allow referees. Like if a referee does a poor job consistently, then there should be a repercussion for it.
Yeah.
And you're not punishing somebody for. You're not punishing them for doing a bad job, but the fact of the matter is that if I was writing a report at work and I made 3 or 4 bad attempts at a report, they just wouldn't put me on that work.
Yeah.
I'd be given something else to do for a bit, or I'd be given training to then be able to do that report properly. So, if you want referees to be, if you're saying it's a job and then it should be treated like a job, and if you're underperforming, there are repercussions in the real world. So, but it has to be done in a way that doesn't undermine them.
Yeah, I mean they do it in Scotland. There's been a few games where I've seen. I won't name any referees in particular, but I have seen referees going from the Premiership to the Championship, and that's the way that they deal with it in Scotland. It's getting them. I think they do it from a well-being point as well, because if a referee's getting a lot of heat, like Mike Dean will be doing, what's the harm in putting him in down to the Championship where he's not going to get as much media attention? Because let's face it, the Championship doesn't get as much media attention. It takes him into that zone, and it just allows everything to cool down. People forget about what's happened, and in 2 weeks he's back into the Premier League. So I
think that's an excellent point. It's not. It can be used not to punish them, but to aid them.
Yeah, absolutely. Because again, it gets them back to a different level. They can refocus, and then build their way back into the Premier League. So I would agree with that.
I mean, just quickly, I know we're going to move on after this, but that you said you weren't going to name a referee, but I am now. Willie Collum has came out and said in a podcast before, saying that he personally, after a sending off, that he knew he got wrong after the reaction of players and stuff. He just knew it was wrong, but he couldn't overturn it at the time. So he knew he'd had a bad one, and he needed to swallow the pill. But he referred it as it's kind of like a player losing form. He says sometimes you need to go down to the reserve, like in football terms, the reserves. But for him, it's go down to the Championship, League One, have a couple of good games, then come back to the Premier League when you're feeling confident again in your own refereeing abilities, and that way you feel more comfortable in what you're doing.
Maybe
if they gave referees the option, then it wouldn't undermine them. It wouldn't be a punishment.
No.
It would be, that could be an option.
So, final wee thing regarding Mike Dean, etc., etc. We mentioned at the start about Lacazette. He's got into a bit of a feud with Martinez of Villa over a foul that was committed in the eyes of Mike Dean by Lacazette on the goalkeeper. Now we've all had a wee look at it. Effectively what happens is Lacazette and Martinez are holding on to each other, and it looks more that Martinez is pulling Lacazette's shirt, and they both fall to the ground. Now, technically speaking, if you're looking at it, it should have been a penalty to Arsenal. Sorry, he's pulling an opponent down. But obviously, Mike Dean gave it the other way. VAR, I don't believe VAR looked at it. I'd assume they probably they wouldn't have looked at it in that one, because they wouldn't have determined that as a clear and obvious error, because generally speaking goalkeepers are protected, etc, etc. But that was one that I thought they got wrong. They did there was a pull down by Martinez. So again, just gathering thoughts on that one.
If Martinez is a centre back, if that's Tyrone Mings, that's a penalty.
Yeah. So this is why I mentioned goalkeeper protection and how protected they are, because in a referee's eyes, if a keeper's down on the ground after being involved in a tussle with a player, nobody can defend that goal effectively with their hands. So that's why a foul is going to be given against the keeper. But when you look at that, yeah, Lacazette could easily have challenged for that ball, but he couldn't because he was on the ground. He'd been tugged down. So when I've thought about it, because I know at the start I said it wasn't a foul, but when I look at it again and I do think about it, because that's what I should do as a referee, I should take a step back and think it's a foul.
I mean, no wonder Mike Dean's getting heat, because you're putting him into this game and it wasn't him that was in charge. So.
Oh, was it not?
I'm sure Chris Kavanagh will be loving it that he's not getting the time for this. So,
golly.
But no,
oops.
Yeah, I agree that the goalies are basically, I call them the untouchables. They genuinely cannot be touched in the box, otherwise it's a foul apparently. So even if it's a 50-50 ball with somebody that's gone up for a header or whatever, but I do believe it should have been a penalty.
He knows what he's doing, Martin. He knows by pulling Lacazette into him, and if he knows if he's the one going over first, that it's gonna appear to the referee that Lacazette was the instigator. He's completely at it.
Aye.
Classic Argentinian footballer.
Aye, they know how to do
He's
it.
even Argentinian. He's Hispanic.
There are reasons though, Fleming, that keepers are protected, and I've stated one of them. They're the only player on the field that can use their hands to handle the ball. So if a goalkeeper's on the ground for whatever reason, albeit he's fouled an opponent, but a referee's always going to favour the goalkeeper in that situation, purely because they're taking out the game. But I know what you mean. You can't do anything to a keeper. You can't jump into a keeper because they just get given. So, there has to be a bit of a law change in there, in my opinion.